Hey everybody, Healthy Prepper here with the topic of restrictive diets and prepping. Yes, I've been doing some thinking about the dieting that I've been doing over the years, and let me tell you, I've been on just about every kind of diet, vegetarian, vegan, raw food, juicing, shakes, protein, and yada yada. And this video is not about what I'm doing or what worked for me or didn't work for me. This is about if you are on a restrictive diet, what are you going to do about it in case of an SHTF scenario? And I think this really deserves some talk because many people today are on unique, unusual diets, some by choice and some are mandatory based on healthcare concerns. I would say mine were primarily, I wanted to be healthier and I wanted to be leaner, so those were my choices. I would call those by choice. And actually all diets are by choice because we choose what we put in our mouth every day. So I just wanted to bring this to light because you may be a vegetarian and it's time now to ask yourself, what are you going to do if an SHTF / apocalypse / doomsday scenario happens? How are you going to handle your food requirements then? And the reason why I bring this up is any major shock to the system, like a huge change in diet, can cause revolt in the system. Many soldiers can tell you that going from eating normal food to emergency rations or MREs, or these aren't MREs, but I guess it's sort of ready to eat, but these are the food vacuum-sealed dehydrated food rations, basically pretty hard bricks. They're very dry. They plug your system up very quickly. So if you go to any radical change, it's going to be a huge insult to the body. So you may want to pre-think this out before anything happens if you are prepping and if you're prepping for the future. When I actually came into the world of prepping, I was a raw fooder. So that was pretty much my diet. Fruits and veggies, all raw. Nuts, almond milk, made my own, did the whole thing. Went into juicing for a while, and I started prepping, and I realized it was going to be hard to store this. So I had to ask myself, what were my options? And my options at the time were, well, I could dehydrate it, so I did. I started to dehydrate a lot of food, and started to can some veggies and fruits, and I thought, okay, at least that's something. And I ventured into the world of gardening. Very lightly, I realized that if I was going to eat like this, I was going to have to self-sustain somehow. I found I'm not the greatest gardener. I'm still learning. I doubt I could sustain myself on my personal gardening skills. But so that became a bit of a concern. And I started to look at all the canned food and thought to myself, oh my God, if an SHTF scenario does happen, am I only going to eat canned food the rest of my life? That seemed very sad. So that's why I started the dehydrating that, planning ahead. Also purchasing seeds. I thought, you know, maybe I could get together with a community and we could all grow a garden together once things calms down, and we could help each other by, you know, taking turns and growing things and that. So anyway, I just want to go through some different basic diets that a lot of people are on, and maybe some options that you might have on how you can carry this into the future, or another thing to think about, do you want to carry this into the future? And I'll tell you, just in a nutshell, what did happen to me was I was on the raw food diet for a while, probably about a year, I would say, and I finally went, and I was very good about eating a balanced diet. I added supplements. I took tons of vitamins, and just in case, I had a very varied diet. And I decided to go get my blood tested, and I found out that I was low in calcium and phosphorus. And I was actually taking calcium and phosphorus, liquid supplements, so that concerned me greatly. So I decided, you know what, I'm done with the restrictive dieting. I'm going to learn how to eat proteins, carbohydrates, and fats in moderation, combined with exercise, to get stronger and leaner. And one of the things I did find when I was on the raw food diet was that I was very weak. I had no energy. We would walk around the neighborhood, which is about a mile, and I was so tired after that mile. It was just like pulling a huge wagon behind me. For me personally, the carbohydrate brings energy into my life, and if I control the amount of it, I can definitely gain the energy without gaining the weight. So enough about that. Basically, so in my world, I decided I was going to go back to eating proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and chocolate. That was going to be my mainstay. But I was going to do it in as healthful way as possible, and trying to think of prepping, how I was going to incorporate those things so that I had variety and sustainability. Okay, so let's talk about vegetarianism and veganism. These are folks basically eat vegetables. Vegans only eat vegetables. Vegetarians might also eat dairy, fish. There's a lot of different ways to define a vegetarian. Now, these folks do have the option in the prepping world to garden, to fortify themselves. They can dehydrate. They can store seeds and plant seeds. Raw fooders, another category of the vegetarian or the vegan, even more extreme, no cooking at all, but there is allowed some light dehydrating, which I did a lot of, and it was actually pretty good. You can make some very interesting things with that. You do it on a lower heat so it doesn't destroy the enzymes in the food. That's the basic premise behind it. But also raw fooders will need to think ahead. They'll have to have a very bountiful garden to begin with. They probably want to live in a warmer climate where they can produce their own food year-round. They want to have a lot of backstock of seeds on tap, and also know how to garden, and also become masters of light heat dehydration. Now, another category is the protein and veggies folks, kind of the South Beach diet folks. It's basically the low-carb diet. You're eating a lot of chicken and veggies, whatever. You may want to consider, how am I going to store for long-term protein and veggies? Well, obviously you can get protein from meats. You can get it from beans and rice if you combine them together correctly. So there's a lot of things that you can put aside. You may want to focus on canned meats. You may want to learn how to fish if you're close to a water source, which I hope you are. You may want to work on hunting and trapping skills so that you can make sure that you have enough protein to survive. Protein is very satisfying by nature. You don't need a lot of it. It will give you the satiated feeling. And generally, we can't eat too much of it. We tend to get full on protein. So the next one is a juice diet. Well, let's say you're a hardcore juicer. You've got your fancy juicer, and you're wailing away there every morning, chop, 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 throw the veggies and fruit in, and away you go. Well, you're going to become hugely dependent on what you can produce or what your community can produce. You're also hugely dependent on weather and how warm the area is. And obviously, it's going to be difficult to juice as easily as you do now without electricity. Yeah, you'll be able to squeeze some oranges and things like that, but let's face it, in an SHTF scenario, if there's no electricity for a sustained period of time, you're going to go hungry. Or you're just going to end up eating the fruit and veggies instead, chewing your juice. Fruitarians, probably the most restrictive diet that I know of. They just eat fruit. That's a personal choice. I think we need more vitamins than that, but like I said, this is more about what can you do to survive if you're on a restricted diet. Okay, so now there are the people who have, there's another category of folks who have medical concerns that really have to eat a certain way, or they should eat a certain way. So I would call this more of a mandatory category. For example, the diabetics out there need to lean towards a low-carb, low-fat diet. Folks with heart disease, coronary artery disease, need to lean towards low-fat, low-cholesterol, low-salt. If you have high blood pressure, things like that. If you have high cholesterol, you have to watch out for those things. If you're thinking ahead now, the diabetics, the low carb, you probably have enough options with certain canned food, dehydrated food, things like that, where you can actually plan ahead to avoid consuming too much carb. But this would have to be well planned out. Plus, I strongly believe the main goal of the diabetic patient is to become as least diabetic as possible. Some people, it's not possible. You can't change your numbers. You can't change the fate you've been dealt. But probably about 80% of people who are diabetic can improve their diabetic status and their health. They can drop the weight. They can get lean and mean. They can get strong. They can do now the things they need to do in order to make the difference, so they don't need to take the pills or the insulin shots later in case of an SHTF situation. One of the biggest concerns in an SHTF situation is medication. If you can't get medication, you're as good as dead. So you want to ask yourself, what can I do now so I don't have to take as much medication or medication at all? I've seen a lot of diabetic patients come off of medication completely once they've completely reversed their eating style, lifestyle. It is possible. It's not possible for everyone. It takes a lot of commitment, a lot of devotion, a lot of willpower. You got to be honest with yourself. Am I going to do it? If you're going to do it, how can I do it? How can I do it healthfully and as quickly as possible? Ask yourself these questions now. You don't want to be in the later situation. It's very, very hard to store insulin in an SHTF situation. Insulin needs many requirements to be kept stable. Supplies will run out. We might not be making it after certain events happen, if they happen. So, something to think about. Heart disease, folks. Number one thing that kills us all, bar none over anything else. If you've got clogged arteries, if you're overweight, if you're not healthy, if you're not moving, if you eat a very high salty diet, things like that, you may want to really take a good hard look to see if you want to be this way if something bad happens, because you're going to be taking that with you. It's possible in an SHTF scenario you might actually end up becoming healthier because you may lose a lot of weight. You may not have access to as much salt and things like that, depending on what your stores are. If you're sitting there with two, buckets of beans and rice, and you didn't pack any salt, well, there you go. A little salt is good. Too much is definitely not good. Okay, so then we've got other certain intolerances. Let's say you're lactose intolerant. You don't break down milk sugars very well, so you don't do well with cheese and milk and dairy and yogurt and cottage cheese and things like that. You're probably just going to have to watch the ingredients of what you prep and just put aside stuff that you know doesn't have that in it. And it's very important when you have a restrictive diet to think about the bug out scenario. What if something really bad happens and all you had was your bug out bag and you had to run? What would your plan be to maintain your healthy as possible eating plan? Obviously, most of us would go to just eating first because, all diets go out the window in crisis. So if there's nothing else, you're going to eat what's in front of you, and it may not be the best stuff. The more you plan ahead, the better chances you have to survive. The other intolerant folks are the gluten intolerant. Let's say you can't eat wheat products or they just make you uncomfortable. It's probably more of an intolerance than an allergy for most folks, but some folks may have an allergy to wheat. That's possible. And that's another category. If you're allergic to certain foods, obviously you're not going to be storing foods with that in it. But if it's a very common food, peanut allergy, nuts, fruits, things like that, you just have to be aware of what's in there. And if you're eating somebody else's food rations because of a bug out scenario, you're going to have to double check and make sure stuff isn't in there. So I just want to bring this to light. If you are on a restrictive diet, start thinking now. Like, for example, here's some easy examples. What can I do? I'm overweight. I'm diabetic. I have heart disease. What can I do? I have to watch my salt intake. Okay, consider reduced sodium soups. They're not no sodium, but it is reduced sodium, and you can store it. You can also add things to that to make it even lower sodium. So let's say if you add water or you add more vegetables to that, you're going to reduce the sodium content just by adding more volume to the soup. You might want to go organic. Yes, for the lucky ones out there who have bucks to burn. There are organic canned items, plenty of them out there these days that you can pick up and put on your food pantry shelves. Or you're just trying to get lean and mean and you want to be a fighting machine. Lots of light versions of canned items out there as well. Now you might say to yourself, well, in a SHTF scenario, I don't want to go light food. I don't want to, I need calories, calories, calories. Well, you always got your backup carbohydrates for calories. Those are very good to stock up the calories, to give you the energy to do all the things you're going to need to be doing. It's going to be a very active lifestyle in the SHTF situation. You know, okay, for long-term food storage, some people, as we do, we store Go Foods, and oops, this was right when we were in the super healthy mode too. So, I mean, as healthy as dehydrated food can get, it is actually non-GMO, balanced sodium, vegetarian, no MSG, low shelf life, natural, irradiation-free. So it's got a lot of good perks to it too. So kind of think ahead. Think about what would make a difference to you. Of course, we want to eat the healthiest food we can to sustain our bodies through any horrible situation. But it might come down to eating a brick of something that's hard and compressed, and we don't know what it is, but it might be the difference between life and death. And odds are, we're going to eat it. So get as healthy as you can now. I can't emphasize that strongly enough. You know, Monsanto, the evil corn, and you. I know everybody has thoughts on that. So health up as much as you can. Get so darn healthy and so strong, you actually don't need the medication anymore. That is the best case scenario. It may or may not be able to be done. If you can't quite get there, do the best you can. Do what you can. Make it a goal, make it doable, and challenge yourself. There's some easy things you can get out there. I mean, the grocery stores are making things easier and easier for us who are trying to get more veggies in our diet. This little veggie stir fry is in the grocery section, and it is, I got focus here, 25 calories, contains 4 servings. This is only 100 calories, people. I mean, look at that's a lot of food for 100 calories. I mean, that's a good filling lunch, you know? 100 calories. I mean, you eat one meal a day like that, and that's going to knock off some unnecessary pounds if you're fighting the weight monster. So kind of think outside the box before we have to eat from the can. There you go, folks. Happy and healthy prepping. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I'm sure there's going to be some great conversation on this one. I know people have very strong feelings about what they eat, and I certainly respect everybody's dieting choices. I just want you to think ahead for what might come down the pike, just in case. Think now. Take care, folks. Happy and healthy prepping.